Today we're going to be talking about technology standards, sometimes called best available technology, best available techniques, best economically feasible technology, or BATs for short. According to the US EPA, the average American uses more than 300 gallons per day of water in their home. 70% of that use occurs indoors, with about 25% going to toilets, 20% for faucets, and 20% for showers. Of course, that varies regionally. In the West, we tend to use a bit more water for irrigating our lawns in places that get more rainfall. Now, it would be virtually impossible for the government to set quantity restrictions on water. They would have to know how many people are in a house at a given time, whether or not family was visiting in a given month, and if there was a leaky faucet, how crazy would it be if one day your water just shut off because you had reached your quota? Instead of using hard limits for water use, the government has enacted a series of policies with technology standards. The National Energy Policy Act of 1992 regulated the flow rates of faucets and shower heads. Since 1994, all faucets should use no more than 2.2 gallons of water per minute, and shower heads were limited to 2.5 gallons per minute. The EPA also created a WaterSense program that created standards for products and applied a label if the faucet flow was less than 1.5 gallons per minute, which is 32% less than the federal standard. The other area you're going to see a lot of technology standards in your daily life are related to your car. So the introduction and sort of now regulation and requirement of seatbelts. We have requirements for airbags, starting to see some standards around gas efficiency, miles per gallon. And in the 1970s or so, as cars became a bigger part of our life, we focused a lot of standards and regulation on air quality to clean up things like ozone and smog, especially in large cities. In 1970, Congress passed the Clean Air Act, which allowed the EPA to regulate pollution from cars. In 1975, you see the first corporate average fuel economy, or CAFE standards, going into place. They established fuel economy standards and requirements for catalytic converters on cars. The EPA estimates that newer cars are 99% cleaner for common pollutants like hydrocarbons, carbon monoxide, nitrogen oxides, and particle emissions. One study by NOAA and some partners done in 2012 found that vehicle-related pollutants have decreased by 98% since the 1960s, despite large increases in vehicle use. Most of those improvements are due to technology requirements on cars, including the requirement for catalytic converters. An interesting visual is to look back on old photos of cities and compare them with how those cities look today. In the 1970s, the EPA used to have a series called Documerica that's now in the National Archives. In it, you can scroll through old photos of cities covered in smog, and you really see how widespread it was. We hear stories of Los Angeles and New York all the time, and how bad their problems were. But you see the same thing in Cleveland, in Phoenix, and in Salt Lake City, which I had always thought of as a fairly clean city. It's remarkable how many cities had terrible air quality. Another type of technology standard is called an interoperability standard. It ensures that pieces of technology fit well together. This is really important in things like emergency services, where one piece of the system really needs to be able to plug in seamlessly with other parts. When fire hoses were first invented, they all had different threads. The same was true of fire hydrants when they were invented in 1817. Each company patented their own design, including how hoses connected to hydrants. This protected the companies from competition, but would eventually prove itself to be disastrous. Various towns would buy fire hydrants from various companies, which wasn't really an issue until something like the Baltimore Fire of 1904 came along. A large fire broke out in Baltimore in 1904. As it grew in size, fire trucks, boats, and the like were called in from neighboring towns. There were 57 engines, 2 hose companies, 1 fireboat, and 1 police boat used to fight the fire. Firefighting agencies came from Altoona, Annapolis, Chester, Harrisburg, New York, Philadelphia, Wilmington, and York. Some companies fit Baltimore hydrants, and some did not. Lessons from the Baltimore fire led to the development of national standards around fire hydrants and hoses that most communities follow today. The same thinking has led to standards for mundane things like USB plugs and life-saving things like consistency in healthcare. In this world of COVID-19, it's important that hospitals follow the same protocols for diagnosing illness and caring for sick patients. Standardized technology allows things like ventilators to be moved around the country if needed in times of crisis. So, let's review. We have 2 types of technology standards. We have quality standards that determine the level of quality of the output. For environmental issues, that quality might be the air or the exhaust, and standards could be about how clean that air is. 2, we have interoperability standards that develop comparable processes, inputs into production processes, and tools used in that process.